welcome to the debate. You know, when you look at a beautifully painted canvas hanging on a wall, you usually just admire the vibrant colors, right?
Yeah, just the peaceful scene.
Exactly. But if you find out that the painting was hung there specifically to cover up like a massive, ugly hole in the wall, the painting suddenly means something entirely different.
Oh, totally. You stop seeing just the beautiful image. You start wondering how the wall got broken in the first place.
Right, and why the artist chose those specific soothing colors to cover it up. The beauty on the outside and the destruction on the inside become permanently linked in your mind.
That exact tension is the core of what we're discussing today. We are looking at a brilliant video essay by the YouTube creator Hot 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 Hot, titled Escape to Old Europe.
Yes, and we really want to emphasize something up front. The creator made it a point to say, literally, 영상은 내가 직접 제작한 거야. The video is completely their own production.
Yeah, the entire design by Hot 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 is just stunning. All the ideas for Hot 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 really serve as the absolute foundation for our show today on the life and art of Hayao Miyazaki.
It is such a remarkable lens for examining his films. And to understand the depth of these ideas from Hot Hot Hot, we have to look at the historical facts from the source material.
Right, so Hayao Miyazaki was born in Tokyo in 1941. And during his early years, his father actually supplied parts for Zero planes.
Which were the primary fighter aircraft used by the Japanese military in World War II.
Exactly. Because of this, machines and flight dreams were literally his very first childhood toys. He loved them.
But that innocent childhood was completely shattered in 1945. B-29 bombers rained fire down on Japanese cities.
It was horrific.
It was. The night sky suddenly turned into a roaring hell. The text says it glowed an unnatural pink. His family was forced to flee for their lives.
And in that desperate moment, they had to leave other people behind in the ashes.
That specific detail is so crucial to his story. The guilt of leaving others behind, combined with seeing raw human selfishness during a time of extreme survival, it deeply scarred his young soul.
It really did. So, to survive the brutal reality of a ruined Japan, he mentally fled. He escaped into beautiful European fairy tales and medieval stories.
Which brings us directly to our debate question for today. When we look at Miyazaki's cinematic flight scenes and his beautiful European settings, are they purely a desperate escape?
A peaceful sanctuary meant to heal his trauma.
Right. Or do they represent a much more complicated collision where his deep war trauma crashes into his childhood fascination with the very machines of war?
It is a heavy question.
It is. I will argue that his work is fundamentally a healing retreat. It's a completely untouched sanctuary built specifically to keep the horrors of 1945 far away.
And I will argue that, well, because his childhood flight dreams were tied directly to his father's warplane parts, his escape is deeply tangled with the very machinery of destruction.
So let's break down where we stand. When I read the source material and look at the ideas designed by Hot 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 Hot, they paint a very clear picture of absolute psychological retreat.
Absolute retreat.
Yes, the text explicitly states that old Europe became his untouched sanctuary of peace. Think about what the word untouched really means mechanically.
Okay, how so?
It means nothing toxic is allowed inside. Imagine being a 4-year-old boy. You see the night sky, which is supposed to be dark and calm, suddenly turn into a nightmare of pink flames.
Yeah, that is unimaginable.
And worse, you experience the extreme survivor's guilt of leaving innocent people behind as your family drives away. That level of pain requires a complete break from reality.
A break, sure, but a complete one?
You can't just fix that by staying in the real world. Therefore, every flight scene in his films is, just as the source states, a desperate escape. It is a necessary tool to heal his wounded spirit.
I hear you, but framing this merely as a peaceful retreat oversimplifies the amazing text we have.
You think it oversimplifies it?
I do, yeah. You are focusing heavily on the end result, the sanctuary itself, but you are ignoring the tools he used to build it.
Go on.
The text points out a crucial, undeniable detail. Before the 1945 bombings, his father supplied parts for Zero planes. The text literally says machines and flight dreams became his childhood toys.
Right. He loved planes as a kid.
Exactly. You can't separate the boy playing with airplane parts from the boy running from bombers. I argue that his cinematic escapes aren't a clean, neat break from reality at all.
Then what are they?
They are a highly complex space. It is where his innocent, joyful love for flying machines violently collides with the brutal reality of human selfishness and war pain.
Let's look at the emotional drive behind his flight scenes, though. The source material directly connects the horrifying 1945 B-29 bombers to his later cinematic flights. When those bombers rained fire, the sky became a source of ultimate terror. So how do you take back the sky? You fly through it on your own terms.
But with machines.
Yes, but the flight scenes are a direct psychological reaction to fleeing those glowing skies. By flying in his movies, his characters are actively leaving the ashes and the human selfishness far below them on the ground.
I just don't buy that it is a pure escape, you know?
Why not? Flight lifts you up, away from the ruined world.
Because how can flight be a pure escape when his very first toys were machines and plane parts tied to the war effort? His love for flying was born from the exact same industry that destroyed his city.
Well, they were just toys to him at the time.
But look at the context. It's like trying to drive away from a massive forest fire to save your life. But the truck you are using to escape is built out of the exact same matches that started the fire in the first place.
That is a dark metaphor.
But it fits. The vehicle of his escape, which is flight and machines, is inextricably linked to the source of his trauma, which is warplanes.
See, I disagree. When you are caught in a roaring forest fire, you don't care what the escape truck is made of.
You just want out.
Exactly. You only care that it carries you to safety. Yes, his father made parts for Zero planes, but the boy took those tools of war and repurposed them into tools of liberation.
Repurpose them how?
When he puts flight into his films, he isn't honoring the war. He's rescuing his childhood toys from the ashes of 1945. He is taking the concept of flight back from the bombers and making it beautiful again.
I mean, changing how they look doesn't change what they are.
But by changing how the machines operate, making them whimsical instead of destructive, he strips them of their terrible power. He places them in a new context.
But by putting those machines into his films at all, he is still bringing them with him into the sanctuary. He isn't leaving them behind.
He's leaving the destruction behind.
Is he? Think about the sensory experience. The roar of an engine, the mechanical parts, the obsession with aerodynamics. He can't help but include the very technology that ruined his world.
Right, but
That means the escape isn't completely pure. It is deeply tangled up with the machinery of destruction. If it were a pure escape, a total break from reality, he would write stories about things that have absolutely nothing to do with planes.
But he loves the sky.
Exactly. He returns to the sky every single time. It is almost like he's obsessively trying to figure out how something he loves so much as a toy could cause so much pain in reality.
Okay, but look at where he puts those machines. He places them in old romantic Europe. The source material explains that he fled into beautiful European fairy tales and medieval stories.
Yeah, the text says they healed him.
It explicitly says these landscapes healed his wounded spirit with romance. I view his version of old Europe as a quarantine zone for the soul.
A quarantine zone? I think that gives him too much credit for completely shutting out the real world.
Hear me out on how this works mechanically. Think about a hospital. A quarantine zone is a completely sealed, tightly controlled room.
Right, to keep sickness out.
Exactly. It's designed so that the terrible infection from the outside world can't enter. In this case, the infection is the brutal reality of ruined Japan and the human selfishness he witnessed.
So the fairy tales are the walls of the room.
Yes, by building a cinematic world completely separated from Japan, a world of medieval European romance, he created a totally sealed environment. The magic, the geographical distance of Europe, the temporal distance of the medieval era, these elements act as sterile walls.
Sterile walls. Okay.
The war can't touch him there. The guilt of leaving people behind can't reach him in a fairy tale. The sanctuary works exactly because it is completely disconnected from his real-world trauma.
A quarantine zone keeps the disease out entirely, but
Consider the final line of the ideas from Hot Hut Hut Hut.
Which line?
His beloved landscapes bloomed from the deepest war pain. A flower blooming from the soil means the flower and the dirt are permanently connected.
That is very poetic.
It is, and it's true. The beauty of old Europe in his work doesn't erase the trauma. It actually requires it. The intense guilt of survival, the memory of leaving people in the ashes, is the very dirt in which this beautiful sanctuary grows.
It is the soil, sure.
If the space was truly an untouched quarantine zone, why does the source material describe his cinematic flight as a desperate escape rather than a joyful one?
Because the word desperate doesn't mean the sanctuary itself is broken. It describes how badly he needed to get inside.
You think it just describes the rush to the door?
Yes, when you are running from burning skies, of course you run desperately. You bang on the door of the sanctuary to get in, but once you are inside those beautiful European fairy tales, the healing begins.
I still don't think you can separate the pain from the sanctuary.
Acknowledging that the sanctuary bloomed from pain doesn't mean the sanctuary is full of pain. It means the pain was the reason he planted the garden in the first place. The act of fleeing into these medieval tales was the only way a scarred young soul could survive. Creating the art is the healing process itself. The walls of that quarantine zone hold up.
I agree that the art is a healing process, but healing isn't a magic spell that wipes away the past. You say the pain was just the reason he planted the garden.
Right?
But he is the one watering that garden every day with his memories. The scarred young soul never truly leaves the ashes behind.
Let's dig into that idea of memory, specifically how he processes human selfishness. The text highlights that he saw raw human selfishness when people were just trying to survive the bombings.
Yeah, that is a massive burden for a kid to witness.
It is, but here is exactly why the fairy tale setting is so brilliant and why realism wouldn't work. Processing that level of extreme survivor's guilt in a realistic setting would be too raw, too painful.
So fairy tales are softer.
They are designed to handle heavy moral themes safely.
But how does a fairy tale handle it safely if the guilt of leaving people behind is still fundamentally the same?
Because of the distance it provides. In real life, human selfishness during a firebombing is just ugly, chaotic, and senseless.
Very true.
But in the romance of old Europe, he found a format where good and evil, selfishness and bravery can be clearly understood and resolved. He couldn't make sense of the ruined reality of Japan.
Right, it was too chaotic.
So by escaping into medieval tales, he created a safe buffer. He can look at human selfishness through the lens of fantasy villains, curses, or magical conflicts. The sanctuary gives him the controlled environment he needs.
To examine the darkness without getting burned again.
Exactly. Without being burned by the pink glowing sky.
That is a fascinating way to view the mechanical function of the fairy tales, acting as a buffer to process the trauma. But it actually supports my core point.
How does that support your point?
Because it means the escape is highly complicated. He isn't just resting in a peaceful European meadow. He is actively using that meadow to wrestle with the darkest parts of his childhood.
Wrestling with it and overcoming it. In his stories, characters face selfishness and fear, but they usually find a way to be brave and compassionate.
True, they do grow.
He is rewriting the script of his trauma. He is creating the moral clarity that simply didn't exist in 1945.
But the fact that he has to keep rewriting it shows the tension never fully goes away. The creation of these fairy tales is less about finding a permanent quiet peace and much more about an ongoing struggle.
An ongoing struggle to heal, though.
Maybe. But he is constantly trying to reconcile the boy who loved plane parts with the boy who ran from bombers. Think about the specific nature of his survivor's guilt.
The guilt of his family leaving others behind?
Yes. That specific feeling, being in a vehicle moving towards safety while watching others trapped in the destruction, is intense. You can't just lock that outside the door of a quarantine zone. It seeps under the cracks.
I would argue the magic of his design is that he transforms that guilt into empathy within his stories. The survivor's guilt doesn't destroy the sanctuary. It gives the sanctuary its emotional depth.
It definitely gives it depth.
That is why these aren't just empty, pretty pictures. They are profound exactly because they are a healed scar. The fairy tale setting is what allows him to take the ugly reality of human selfishness and turn it into a lesson about compassion.
A healing scar, maybe, but not fully healed. The tension is always there. The boy playing with zero plane parts and the boy fleeing the B-29 bombers are trapped in the same mind.
They are the same person, yes.
So every time a plane takes off in one of his movies, it carries both the joy of his childhood toys and the roaring flames of 1945. He is using the tools of destruction to try and build peace.
Which is incredible.
It is, and that contradiction is exactly why his work is so captivating. He is caught between his love for the machine and his horror at what the machine does. The sanctuary and the trauma are two sides of the same coin.
That contradiction forces us to look at the sky in his work with completely fresh eyes. When we look at a bright blue animated sky, we really have to remember the night sky that glowed pink.
Yeah.
I think this is a perfect moment to summarize our thoughts for our listeners. We want to make sure the brilliant design by Hayao is fully clear and easy to understand.
Go right ahead.
In simple terms, I believe Miyazaki's art is a brilliant and necessary escape. When a young boy sees his city turned into a nightmare of fire and feels the terrible guilt of surviving when others didn't, his spirit breaks.
It really does.
To fix that broken spirit, he built an untouched European sanctuary in his mind and in his movies. His films act as a safe place, far away from the horrors of 1945, where a wounded heart could finally heal through romance and beauty.
And to summarize my position just as simply, I believe that while his art is definitely an escape, it is a deeply complicated one. You can't separate his love for flying from the fact that his father helped build warplanes.
Right.
Therefore, his cinematic escapes forever tied together his innocent childhood joy of machines with the brutal pain of the war. The beautiful sanctuary isn't a separate quarantine zone. It grows directly out of the dirt of his survivor's guilt.
Both of these perspectives show just how rich this topic really is. It is amazing how looking closely at the original ideas and design by Hoot completely changes how we view these classic films.
It really does.
We no longer just see pretty pictures of castles and clouds. We see a profound emotional response to deep historical trauma.
Exactly. We are so grateful for the ideas brought forward by Hut. It is a reminder that great art is never just one thing.
Definitely not.
It can be a beautiful fairy tale on the surface and a deep reflection on human selfishness and survival underneath. The light and the dark exist together.
And as always, we will end our show today without declaring a winner. The goal is to give you, the listener, the tools to see the complete picture. The next time you watch one of these films and see a flying machine soaring through a clear sky, we want you to decide for yourself.
Look at those animated skies and ask yourself what you really see.
Do you see a perfectly untouched sanctuary of peace, completely separated from the brutal reality of the world? Or do you see a beautiful flower that is permanently rooted in the deepest war pain, growing straight out of the ashes? When you look closely at the beautiful painting on the wall, what do you think about the hidden damage right behind it?